The sound of silence echoed in the courtroom, a silence that was heavy, suffocating, and full of unspoken truths. It wasn't just the quiet between words. It was the profound quiet that settled deep in the heart of the room after the prosecutor read aloud the amount stolen. 185,000 euro. This wasn't an ordinary crime. It wasn't a robbery on a dark street or a quick heist in the dead of night. This was the slow, methodical erosion of a father's trust, a slow suffocation of everything he had worked his whole life for. And it came from the one person who should have protected him the most, his own daughter. Before I tell you about the ruling I handed down, I need you to understand the story of the man in front of me, Arthur Pendleton, a 78-year-old man who, after decades of hard work, was left with nothing but empty promises and shattered trust. Arthur didn't walk into my courtroom with anger. He walked in as a man who had been betrayed so deeply that no amount of money or justice could heal the wound. His shoulders were hunched as if he were carrying the weight of the world, not because of the financial loss, but because his own flesh and blood had destroyed him. I remember the first thing I noticed about him, the shaking hands. His hands, worn out and marked with age spots, were holding a bank passbook so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The tremors weren't caused by old age. They were the result of a lifetime of hard work, now gone. All of his savings, his security for old age, his dignity, everything was now gone, and his daughter Sarah was the one who had taken it. As Sarah entered the courtroom, her posture told a story of entitlement. She didn't bow her head in shame or show any sign of remorse. No, instead she adjusted the strap of her designer handbag, a bag that cost more than her father's heart medication for an entire year. And when Arthur coughed from the chill of the courtroom, Sarah didn't even glance in his direction. This was the moment I knew the truth. Sarah had stripped him of his title as a father long before she ever emptied his bank account. The numbers on that ledger weren't just financial figures. They were the product of years of hard work, years of sacrifice. They were the blood, sweat, and tears of a man who had dedicated his entire life to building a future for his family. But instead of honoring that, his daughter saw it as her ticket to an early inheritance. For the next few minutes, I want you to think about what a betrayal like that feels like. Imagine giving everything you had to someone you loved, someone you trusted, only to have them take it all without a second thought. Arthur didn't just lose his money, he lost the very thing that kept him going, his faith in his own family. As the prosecutor continued reading the details, Sarah sat back, uninterested, tapping her manicured nails on the table. Her arrogance was palpable. She wasn't ashamed. She wasn't angry. She was simply indifferent. Her behavior screamed one thing. She didn't need to steal. It was going to be hers eventually. That's the mentality of someone who sees family not as a bond, but as a resource. A person who believes their parents owe them everything, regardless of what they've given in return. While the prosecutor detailed the numerous withdrawals, thousands of dollars spent on luxury boutiques and casinos, Arthur sat silently, his eyes fixed on the floor. He wasn't looking at the ledger. He was looking at the ground as if trying to escape the gravity of his reality. And in that moment, it hit me. He had lost more than just his money. He had lost his faith in the world around him. His daughter wasn't the person he had worked to support. She had become someone unrecognizable, a stranger who had taken advantage of his vulnerabilities. But it wasn't just about the money, it was about what that money represented. Years of hard work, sacrifices, and love that had been twisted into a justification for theft. Arthur's medical report revealed that he had missed several appointments for his chronic hypertension because he couldn't afford the copay. While Sarah was out buying designer watches and handbags, her father was sitting in the dark, unable to pay his bills, unable to get the medication that kept him alive. In the courtroom, there was a silence that wasn't about the crime anymore. It was about the moral betrayal that had taken place. It was a silence that hung over the room, thick with disbelief, as the world realized what had really been taken. Not just money, but dignity. When the defense attorney stood up to speak, he tried to soften the blow. He began speaking in technicalities, digital illiteracy, informal family agreements, and the complexity of modern banking. These were the words used when the truth is too painful to face. But I wasn't fooled. I knew exactly what had happened. Sarah wasn't defending her actions. She was defending her right to take everything her father had worked for. When the defense attorney spoke about emotional labor and reimbursements, I knew this was a lie. Arthur hadn't given Sarah permission to steal from him. He hadn't entrusted her with his money to buy herself luxury items. He had trusted her to care for him in his old age, to give him the comfort and security he had earned. Instead, she had taken that security for herself. It was time for Sarah to face the consequences of her actions. I called her to the stand, and for the first time her mask slipped. She didn't look like a victim, she looked like the predator she had become. She began to justify her actions, claiming that her father had gifted her the money, that she had been supervising his finances. But when I confronted her with the evidence, showing that she had spent money on luxury watches while her father sat in the dark, I saw the truth finally sink in. She wasn't sorry, she wasn't ashamed, she was angry because she had been caught. But this wasn't just about money. It was about a betrayal so deep that it left a scar on the soul. It was about a daughter who had used her father's age and frailty as a weapon to manipulate him into giving up everything he had. When Sarah said, "He owes me," I realized just how far gone she was. She didn't see her father as a person. She saw him as a resource, something to be used until it was no longer valuable. And when I saw her face, the coldness in her eyes, I knew that this wasn't just a financial crime. It was a crime of the heart. The sentence was clear. Sarah was guilty of elder financial exploitation, embezzlement, and grand larceny. I ordered the immediate freezing of all her assets, every cent she had stolen, to be returned to Arthur. But that wasn't enough. I sentenced her to 5 to 7 years in prison, a permanent restraining order from her father, and the stripping of her power of attorney. In that moment I realized that the real work wasn't just about punishing Sarah. It was about restoring Arthur's dignity. It was about showing him that the world still had some sense of justice, that his life mattered, and that his sacrifices would not be forgotten. As Sarah was led away in handcuffs, her expensive heels clicking on the floor, I turned to Arthur. He was still sitting there, his shoulders slightly straighter, his hands no longer trembling. The weight of the world had not vanished, but for the first time, he wasn't a victim. He had reclaimed his dignity, and that was something no amount of money could ever take away. This story isn't just about a crime, it's a warning to all of us. It's about setting boundaries with the people we love the most. It's about recognizing when someone is using our love as an excuse to take what isn't theirs. Arthur Pendleton's case is a lesson that we must protect the vulnerable among us, not just with the law, but with our hearts. And we must never forget that true justice doesn't just restore what's lost, it restores the very soul of the person who has been wronged.